Yesterday, I went on live to chat with those of you who were online, and it was such a fun experience. Once again, thank you to those who were able to make it and keep me company, and I hope others are able to join us for the next live. Now, in yesterday's live stream, I started to mention what I hoped we would get in Bridgerton season 4, especially as it pertains to Benophie, which, for those who don't know, is the ship name for Benedict Bridgerton and Sophie Beckett. However, I didn't have enough time to go fully into details in the live and figured I could just make a quick, short ish video talking about it, especially the central theme of class that is at the heart of Benophie's relationship. Now, I'm pretty sure we can all agree that Bridgerton is a very interesting show in the way in which it avoids certain topics and issues that are prevalent to the time, and in the next breath centers its story within this alternate history universe where some things are different, i.e., the racism and slavery that ideally should be a concern for black people living in Regency England, not applying to the lives of these characters. And some things are more aligned with the historical premise of the time, i.e., society frowning on homosexual relationships. And that is why the bit with Bridgerton and its avoidance of the class issue for most of the seasons we've gotten so far fascinated me. I initially thought it was going to be addressed in season 1, back when Eloise was convinced that it had to be one of the maids that was play acting as Lady Whistledown, to which she was laughed at and immediately reminded that housekeepers and maids are too busy doing their work to spy on members of the ton and write about them. And even if they wouldn't be working, as they would be stinkingly rich, as we see with the case of Penelope when Colin and Portia realized just how much she's worth and how much of Cressida's blackmail sum she could easily pay. Bridgerton, however, dropped this pretty quickly. It was only one scene in the first season, and the story moved on. Because at its core, Bridgerton is a fantasy historical story about the lives of the landed gentry in Regency England. Our focus is on dukes and viscounts and counts and barons and kings. We are not really looking at the help, or at least we were not in season 1. Season 2, however, did a bit more than season 1 in playing with class as regards what options are available to people in their society if they aren't part of the landed gentry. Kate's conversation with Eloise, where she informs the latter of her plans to become her own person, separate from the ton by taking on the job of a governess, is one that has Eloise pretty impressed. Because within their society, women of their class do not work, do not fend for themselves. That is not how their society is built. And Bridgerton season 2 takes this conversation further than it did in season 1, where instead of it just being one scene and one conversation with Eloise, who has been central to the class conversations and discourse that we've gotten on the show so far, and I will come back to her in a bit with regards Sophie, we take things a bit further with Kate reaffirming to Anthony her plan to take on a governor's position after his wedding to Edwina. Even up until the last episode, Kate is still hell-bent on her dream to be a working class woman, far away from Anthony Bridgerton until the latter does his confession and she agrees to marry him. And then we hit season 3 and there is the bit with Penelope being revealed as Lady Whistledown. Like, sure, there is the scandal of her being a working woman and earning her own money, but ultimately, her earnings are tied to her proximity to the ton and is boosted by her class. Penelope is able to get away with what she does or is able to gain access into the spaces that she gets into by virtue of her class. The same cannot be expected or done by someone further down the line. And then we see with Eloise's brief connection with Theo where she likes him, and we see Penelope shut that down briefly because they aren't in the same class or social strata. Part of what separates Eloise and Theo is, yes, the gossip about Eloise's turn and interest in radicalism, but the members of the ton would most certainly have been more scandalized if the truth had been revealed of her interest in a newspaper printer's assistant, no matter how smart and how many books he has read. Their world is not meant to meet. And that is something that a hurt Theo has to explain to Eloise, who does not immediately understand his points and where his objection lies. But that's because Theo, unlike Eloise, is very aware of their difference in class and why it matters in their love story. And just as we've gotten from the previous seasons, I really do hope that the show takes the time to really explore the themes of class and how this difference can hinder a relationship amongst the ton. How it throws obstacles in their way and is unbelievable to certain members within it. Because the core of Benedict's romance with Sophie, and I'm going to give a minor spoiler here. I'm not going to go into full details on the story and the plot for those who haven't read the books. I want to be surprised by the episodes when they drop. But as I was saying, the core of Benedict's romance with Sophie, minor spoiler, is tied to their class difference. And so far, Bridgerton as a show has merely done several brushes with the topic. Hell, even Anthony's relationship with Sienna in season 1 and how that brings a lot of hang-ups to their future together isn't explored as much as it could have been. Which is why a lot of people, for example, didn't really understand why Anthony kept going back and forth with regards that particular relationship. It's because there's a wealth of a difference between a Viscount and an opera singer. And what we are meant to get with Benedict and Sophie come their season, and which I hope the show takes the time to fully explore, is the shared difference in class between the second born son of a Viscount, who is now a Viscount's brother, and a maid. Which at its core is what brings a lot of tension and obstacles in Benedict's relationship with Sophie. For a show that doesn't really like to dive into the nitty-gritty of these interactions, the only thing I can hope is that they've been preparing for Benedict and Sophie's story. Because when we look back at all of these interactions through the seasons, we can see the seeds that can be explored in Benophie's romance. The desire for and love of a woman that society deems unacceptable for you, and how that makes you unintentionally keep breaking her heart, as we see with Anthony and Sienna, is something that can come to bear for Benedict and Sophie. The belief that those who work behind the scenes, the maids, the housekeepers, the coachmen, the butlers, have their own complete lives and are capable of having secrets, as we see with Eloise falsely thinking that Mrs. Wilson, their housekeeper, could be Lady Whistledown, is something that can also apply to Sophie. Because we know as the audience that she's actively keeping secrets from those she serves, and her identity as the lady in silver is one that she guards closely. Kate's desire in season 2 to stand for herself and be responsible for herself and her own money via honest work is a journey that Sophie gets to take in her own story, even amidst the pressure of being asked to let go of it. And once again, the fear of being discovered, the realization that the class divide is one that would ensure that unless things change, spoiler, not going to say, but unless things change, there's no room for a relationship to be possible between her and Benedict, is something that Sophie, like Theo vocalizes, will have to come to terms with a relationship with the second Bridgerton boy. And this is just the themes of self-realization and the class stratification and differences that apply to the story. We still have to deal with her stepmother and stepsisters and Benedict's desperation to control the situation and find her, then hold on to her, and there are layers and so many things to be explored in the romance, even Benedict's own story. And I don't know about you, but the thought of that fills me with so much terror. Because Bridgerton, especially in the last season, has proven that they get so bogged down by all of the side plots that the main characters rarely get the time to really breathe and grow and show us their story. And if that happens with Benophie, it would be such a disaster because there's so much intricacies to their story. I don't want people to just limit it to it's a Cinderella adaptation, because it's more than that. Hell, Violet is meant to get her moment in the sun, with regards her being one of the only few women in the ton who can reach out across class lines for the happiness of her children. And a lot of viewers will miss this, will miss the significance of this if the season is rushed. Plus, the fact that this conversation and the slow way the show has been interacting and giving subtle hints about the class situation in Bridgerton has been through Eloise's interaction with other characters in the story means that sufficient time needs to be given to really flesh out Eloise and Sophie's relationship in the season. And this is the one time where I do not mind them switching Francesca's role in the books to Eloise. Because if you know the scene at the end and a certain rush to a certain jail, then you know what role I'm referring to. And I think having Eloise and Hyacinth be the one who play that role, it will fit it well. Especially if they take the time to have Eloise retain her questioning and her curiosity about the class divide and have her converse with Sophie, who straddles both. That way, it's not merely Benedict being the only bridge between the classes. Eloise has served that role in the previous season so far, subtly in a way that I think a lot of people missed out on. And it would be great to have her come full circle, to see if she's grown in that moment and has spent more time observing those outside of her class so she doesn't repeat her mistakes with Mrs. Wilson. But at the core of this, my hope and expectation for Benophie in season 4 is that they are the focus of season 4. I need Bridgerton to regain the balance they showed with season 1, Queen Charlotte, to some extent season 2. Do not make them the side characters in their season like was done for Pauline. Especially not when they have such a sensitive issue to navigate in their relationship. But that's just my thought. What about yours? Please share them in the comments. Like this video if you've watched this long and haven't done so yet. Subscribe if you want to. Share this video. Support me on Patreon if you can. And until tomorrow's video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.